Imagine walking into a sacred space, a place where faith and integrity are meant to guide every word and action. Now, picture discovering that behind closed doors, some of the very leaders entrusted with your spiritual guidance were caught in moments that could shatter their entire reputation. Bishop Brandon Porter and several COGIC elders, men revered for their devotion, were seen drinking together in a situation that has left the church community reeling. What really happened that day? And why is this story sending shockwaves across the gospel world? Stay tuned, because what you're about to hear is a truth that few dared to speak, and it changes everything you thought you knew about faith, leadership, and accountability. For decades, the Church of God in Christ, or COGIC, has been one of the most respected pillars in the gospel community. Known for its devout leaders, powerful preaching, and strict moral standards, COGIC has cultivated an image of holiness and accountability that millions of followers trust. But behind that polished reputation, there have always been whispers. Stories of mistakes, lapses in judgment, and moments that clashed with the very values the church preaches. Now, one of the latest controversies has captured attention like never before. Bishop Brandon Porter, a rising figure in the COGIC hierarchy, was recently caught in a situation that many are calling shocking, even scandalous. Alongside several elders, men long regarded as spiritual guides, Porter was seen drinking in a context that raises uncomfortable questions about leadership, trust, and the human side of those we place on pedestals. You won't believe the details that have emerged, the reactions from the church community, and the unexpected fallout that followed. This is where it gets unbelievable. The story isn't just about a drink or two, it's about accountability, hidden patterns, and the tension between public virtue and private actions. By the end of this video, you'll see a side of Bishop Porter and the COGIC leadership few have dared to discuss openly, and it might forever change the way you view the church. But first, let's go back and understand how COGIC's history and culture have set the stage for moments like this. To truly understand why the recent events surrounding Bishop Brandon Porter have rocked the COGIC community, we first have to look at the weight of history and the expectations placed on its leaders. The Church of God in Christ has always prided itself on discipline, holiness, and moral integrity. Its founders and early leaders set a standard. Ministers were expected to be beyond reproach, not just in public, but in every private corner of their lives. This was more than tradition. It was a promise to the congregants, a sacred trust that their spiritual guides would embody the values they preached. Over the decades, COGIC has grown into a powerhouse of gospel influence, shaping not just spiritual lives, but also cultural and social spheres. Its bishops, elders, and ministers are elevated to near celebrity status within the community. People look to them not just for sermons, but for moral guidance, mentorship, and leadership in times of personal and societal crisis. Yet with such immense responsibility comes immense pressure. Leaders are human, and human nature is messy. In the past, whispers of missteps, financial improprieties, personal scandals, and lapses in judgment have occasionally surfaced. While some were addressed quietly within church channels, others were brushed under the rug to protect the institution's reputation. This brings us to the present moment. Bishop Brandon Porter, a man seen as a rising star in COGIC, suddenly finds himself at the center of a story that threatens to unravel not just his image, but also the unspoken trust placed in him and the elders surrounding him. What makes this incident so shocking is not just the act itself, but the way it exposes the tension between public virtue and private reality, a theme that has echoed through COGIC's history more often than many realize. And here's where it gets more intense. Sources say this wasn't just a casual drink among friends. What happened involved rituals, late-night gatherings, and moments that insiders describe as eye-opening and unexpectedly candid, revealing a side of church leadership that few members ever see. But before we dive into that controversial night, it's important to understand exactly who Bishop Porter is and why his rise in COGIC made this scandal so headline-grabbing. Bishop Brandon Porter's journey within COGIC reads like a story of dedication, ambition, and relentless pursuit of spiritual influence. From his early days as a passionate young minister, Porter distinguished himself with an unwavering commitment to preaching, teaching, and community outreach. Congregants describe him as magnetic, someone whose sermons could lift spirits, ignite hope, and leave people feeling as though they had been personally spoken to by God. By his mid-30s, Porter had already earned respect, not just locally, but across the wider COGIC network. He was invited to speak at regional conferences, mentor younger ministers, and serve on important committees that shaped the church's policies. Many saw him as a future leader, someone destined for higher office within the denomination, perhaps even a bishop with national recognition. What made Porter particularly influential was his ability to connect with a younger generation. In an age when some young people are drifting away from traditional religious institutions, Porter seemed to bridge the gap, using social media, video messages, and personal engagement to make faith feel accessible, relatable, and modern. For many in the congregation, he wasn't just a pastor, he was a symbol of hope, progress, and authenticity. And yet, the higher one rises, the more intense the scrutiny becomes. Within COGIC, leaders like Porter are constantly measured against nearly impossible standards. Every word, every action, every public appearance is dissected for consistency with the church's strict moral code. Success brings admiration, but also pressure, envy, and the ever-present fear that one misstep could undo years of carefully built credibility. This context makes the recent revelations about Porter all the more shocking. For someone who built an image of unwavering faith, discipline, and spiritual leadership, the idea that he could be involved in a situation deemed scandalous by church insiders is almost unthinkable. But according to multiple sources, the events in question did not happen in isolation. They involved a gathering of trusted elders, private spaces away from public scrutiny, and behavior that starkly contrasts the carefully curated image of holiness that COGIC leaders are expected to maintain. Here's where the story deepens. Eyewitnesses claim that the night in question revealed more than just drinking. There were conversations and actions that exposed hidden tensions, disagreements, and human vulnerabilities that church members rarely see. For some, it was a revelation that shook the very foundation of trust in these leaders. For others, it was confirmation of what they had suspected but never dared to voice, that even the most revered figures are human, susceptible to temptation, and capable of moments that fall short of perfection. But what exactly happened that night? What did Bishop Porter and the elders do, and why is it causing such a stir across the gospel community? Before we answer that, we need to understand the broader culture within COGIC that makes moments like this both scandalous and revealing. It was a night that would forever change perceptions within the COGIC community, a night that began like any other gathering among leaders, but quickly spiraled into something unforgettable. Sources close to the church describe a private meeting held away from the public eye, where Bishop Brandon Porter and several high-ranking elders came together. On the surface, it appeared to be a typical session for discussion, planning, and fellowship. Yet as the hours wore on, the atmosphere shifted. Eyewitnesses recall that the initial conversations were serious, focusing on church initiatives, upcoming conferences, and the responsibilities of leadership. But soon, bottles of alcohol appeared, quietly brought into the room by some elders. At first, it was subtle, a toast here, a glass raised there, but as the night progressed, the boundaries that defined church decorum began to erode. Laughter grew louder, conversations became more candid, and the sacred weight of leadership seemed to give way to a more human and more fallible reality. For members who have long held these leaders on pedestals, the reports were shocking. Bishop Porter, known for his charismatic sermons and spiritual guidance, was now seen in a setting that starkly contrasted with the moral standards he preached. The elders, equally revered, were participating, not as mentors or spiritual guides, but as men caught in the vulnerability of indulgence. One insider described the scene as a mix of relief and recklessness, noting that while the gathering was framed as fellowship, there was an unmistakable sense of secrecy. Phones were tucked away, doors were closed, and the attendees seemed aware that what they were doing was far from the image presented to their congregations. Conversations ranged from church strategy to personal grievances, revealing hidden tensions and disagreements that many in the public sphere would never witness. Here's where the story becomes even more intense. Some sources allege that this gathering wasn't merely social. There were moments described as revealing and uncensored, where the leaders spoke freely about struggles, doubts, and frustrations that are usually suppressed behind the pulpit. For members, these accounts are double-edged. On one hand, they humanize the leaders. On the other, they expose behavior that contradicts the very principles these men are entrusted to uphold. The immediate fallout was swift. Social media began buzzing with rumors, whispers circulated in churches, and members began questioning the integrity of leadership. Questions that had never been openly asked before now demanded answers. How could leaders so committed to faith and moral guidance be seen in such compromising situations? And if they could, what does that mean for the trust placed in them by congregants who believed in their spiritual authority? Yet despite the gravity of the situation, there's more beneath the surface, a layer of complexity that few outside the inner circle understand. This night was not an isolated lapse in judgment, it is part of a larger pattern of human vulnerability among leaders. A reminder that authority does not immunize anyone from temptation, and that appearances often mask the private realities of power, responsibility, and stress. The morning after the gathering, the ripple effects began. What had been a private event behind closed doors suddenly became the subject of whispered conversations in church hallways, text messages between congregants, and, inevitably, social media posts. Within hours, rumors spread like wildfire. Bishop Brandon Porter and several elders had been drinking together, engaging in behavior many considered unbecoming for men of their position. Church members were shocked, confused, and in some cases, angry. For decades, these leaders had been held up as exemplars of morality and spiritual discipline, people to trust with guidance over personal, financial, and spiritual matters. The idea that they could engage in activities perceived as a lapse in judgment struck at the very foundation of faith for some members. On social media platforms like Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, heated debates erupted. Some defended Porter and the elders, arguing that they are human and entitled to private moments of relaxation. They preach, they work, they carry the weight of an entire congregation. One comment read, "Do we really expect perfection 24/7? Others, however, were less forgiving. "This isn't just a night out, it's a betrayal of trust," wrote another follower. "When leaders fail like this, it affects the entire church." What made the controversy even more intense was the mixed messaging from within the church itself. Some insiders reported that initial statements from certain leaders attempted to downplay the incident, framing it as a casual, harmless gathering. Meanwhile, other voices within COGIC pushed for accountability, questioning why this type of behavior wasn't addressed more transparently. The division was clear. Members and leaders alike were grappling with how to reconcile admiration for Bishop Porter's leadership with the reality of the night's events. Traditional media picked up the story as well, amplifying the scrutiny. Headlines framed it as a scandal, describing it as an unexpected crack in the carefully maintained image of one of the largest African American denominations in the country. Commentators discussed the implications for Porter's future, for the elders involved, and for the broader perception of COGIC leadership. The story quickly transcended local church circles, drawing attention from national audiences intrigued by the tension between spiritual leadership and human imperfection. Adding to the tension, some congregants revealed that the night of the gathering had sparked private confrontations and conversations within church leadership. According to insiders, some elders expressed regret and shame, while others appeared defensive, arguing that no wrongdoing had occurred. This internal clash highlights a fundamental challenge facing religious institutions: how to uphold moral authority while acknowledging the inherent humanity of those in leadership positions. But perhaps the most compelling and emotional part of the fallout came from the parishioners themselves. Many expressed feelings of betrayal, describing a sense of disillusionment that extended beyond Bishop Porter or the elders. It was about trust, faith, and the ideals they believed their leaders embodied. Some said they struggled to pray without thinking of the incident. Others debated whether to remain part of the church community at all. The emotional weight of the scandal rippled far beyond one night, challenging both leaders and followers to confront uncomfortable truths. And yet, even amid the controversy, there is a silver lining. Conversations sparked by this incident have forced a dialogue about transparency, accountability, and the pressures faced by religious leaders. Some believe that confronting these realities openly could strengthen the church in the long run, prompting reforms and honest discussions about human fallibility and the expectations placed on those in spiritual authority.